Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Donald Allen Williams. GetOnToIt.com. Get on number 2 it.com. Now let me tell you a little bit about Donald and his testimony before we get started. At the age of 10, when he was playing tag in the house with his younger brother, he broke his C1 vertebrae in his neck, which is commonly fatal. He was instantly paralyzed from the neck down. With his parents out of town that week in December, his older brother called 911 and got him to the hospital where the doctors did not take x-rays because they assumed he was faking injury. They even encouraged his dad to check him out of the hospital to see if he'd stop faking it by telling his father that Don was stunned while playing and was in good enough condition to go play in the snow. His father had to carry Don to the car and to a bed. A day later, x-rays were taken, but doctors could not find evidence of damage. When it became evident that something really was wrong, a specialist finally made the correct diagnosis. Now, throughout the injury, the diagnosis, the terrible surgery, and the recovery process, no one even bothered listening or asking Don what he was feeling or bothered to explain anything of what was happening. The neglect fueled a powerful anger and determination in him to recover. It forced him to grow up a lot sooner than his siblings or friends. It also had him curious as to what makes people think and act as they do, and to wonder why no one bothered to communicate with him since. He was the one with that experience. Now, he put together a really good book. It's called Human Instruction Manual. You can pick it up on his website direct from GetOnToIt.com, or you can pick it up from Amazon. And we're going to get his testimony today, and we're also going to get the keys to unlocking the Matrix, the Human Instruction Manual.
Back together any better than anyone else. And at the age of 10, I was like, oh, this is what's really going on versus what we're told. So that's kind of where the great eye-opener took place. I grew up much like anyone else, went through college, got a degree in mechanical engineering, was last in, first out, cycled through, making a million, saving millions, although they didn't want to pay me millions. And that was largely because I intimidated the hell out of my bosses. I didn't need to be in the industry for years to figure out what would make it effective to what my job was, to what the customers needed, to making things effective within the company. And I quickly picked that up within the first 3 to 6 months. And basically, corporate America as is doesn't like to promote anybody anymore. You think someone who is in charge wants to promote people up so that they can be uplifted, but now it's just holding on to your own job and stifling everybody else. And after I saw that a number of times, I said, I think I'm going to reach out and use this information I've been using, these experiences and all this stuff that I've gathered throughout my life, and actually write something down, make a website, make some other courses for those who really want to invest in themselves, and open up an opportunity for something different. There's a lot of people who do it's like self-development, self-help type stuff, and there's a lot of people who don't really get a lot out of it. They can read it, sounds good, it feels good, but they can't really identify with it. Then the other thing is there's a lot of motivator and inspirational people out there. I could go through my story, and we can relate that, and to some people it might be seen as motivational, to others maybe not. But at the end of the day, it's what I learned through my experience and how I could translate these small but significant finite realities that we live in that we kind of push to the side because we're trained to look at other things. And we're always looking at the shadow instead of looking at the actual picture. So we don't recognize we're in a great illusion that we're allowing and willing to allow to continue. That kind of make sense?
Sure. And I don't know if I heard you properly, but at the very beginning you said you broke your neck and nobody believed you for the first 2 days?
Yes, I was fully paralyzed. And, if you go to the website, get onto it, and you look under my name, and there's a little video there. It goes on for about 40 minutes or so, giving the basic story. And, they thought I was making it up because they didn't take any x-rays. Given the circumstances, they thought I was doing it for attention. They were putting all their ideas into it instead of looking at the facts. And once they finally figured it out, they were like, oh my, we've been carrying you around like a rag doll, and if we would have done the wrong thing, you would have been dead instantaneously. It's a miracle that I'm alive, and that's how the doctors look at it. So this is kind of one of those things. I mean, to me, it's my existence. But to other people, think, oh man, how and people ask questions like, how does that feel? Well, when you can't move, you can't feel anything. But one of the unique things about that is when you can't feel anything, you actually recognize what your feelings are and how your feelings connect with things. This is like the internal feelings, the emotional feelings, not the tactile feelings. And there's a big difference between that.
Did you experience an out-of-body type phenomenon or have a near-death experience as well when you broke your neck?
No near death. Out of body, there was a period when I would say, in flux, where when I couldn't move to when some things had happened where I was able to move a little bit before surgery and all that. And that experience was something like out of Star Trek. I felt like I was phasing through the table or the bed or whatever I was in. I couldn't have like a feeling like I would think of it or you would think of it. I just felt like, for whatever reason, that I was able to touch the floor. And it's hard to put that into context that makes sense, because even to this day, I don't really know what that was. So I'm thinking maybe that was like my energetic body going through the whatever it was and touching the ground, and I don't know. But it was a weird sensation to be true, though.
So what did you do to break your neck?
I actually did a running somersault onto a couch. So you use the couch arm and you just, I was playing tag in the house and ran towards it, and I had done this before. And as I do a big tuck and roll, normally it's like a tuck roll bounce, and you're 4 or 5 feet in front of the person that you're playing tag in the house with, and no big deal. But this time I did it. I landed with the pillow square behind my neck there, and I was in a state of being stunned because I couldn't quite figure out what was happening. I could see my body, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't move it. And I was wondering if I was dead. It was very surreal. And then within seconds, because of the ferocity in which I played with my younger brother, any game that we played, within seconds he's beat me over the head with a pillow. And I can't really do anything. So it's quite the series of shocking moments, one after the other.
Oh, geez, man. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So are you walking now?
Yeah, if you meet me, you would never know that it happened. I was fully recovered in less than 6 months.
What did the doctors say when they finally realized you broke your neck?
Well, I broke the C1, which is right next to the brain stem, kind of like a hairline fracture. And the reason why they couldn't find anything when they finally did do scans is because normally when that happens, people die. Your involuntary organs stop. So, I've heard a lot of things when I was younger. You're here for a reason. There must be some reason you're around, that type of thing. And I was always kind of like, well, I'm telling you things that I'm experiencing and nobody's listening, so will that happen the rest of my life? I don't know. That type of thing. It was more like, the discord, because the experiences that I would experience in the hospital, even after they discovered what it was, and when I communicated what my issue was, they still had a hard time following through and listening to what I was saying. They always had their own agenda, and I always just had to kind of like step back and kind of like watch and do my best to do what I had to do. And people don't recognize that, self-responsibility isn't this weighty thing with bills. It's an internal deal, and it's based off of your decisions to want to be in a certain space within the place that you exist. And one of the things that's highly important, that's covered in the book, and it's what I call the shift from outside in to inside out. The way society teaches us things. It's functional, it works. But both sides of the equation need to be there. There's a balance. And we need the outside world to survive, to live, sustenance, and to take care of, shelter and things like this. But we have been brought up defining ourselves based off of the outside experience inward, so that we don't have a good context of who we are. And we relate to all of our needs and wants based off of outside stimuli and things like this. Whereas when I broke my neck, all that disappeared. All I had was my senses, but I couldn't rely on that outside world. I had to move inward. And when I did that, I recognized this inside-out perspective is really where the control takes place. That, yes, you may feel certain experiences emotionally, or you may think certain things, but that's all an inside job. No one can force you to be that way. And people, there's an analogy that I use, if you go to space or you're on the moon, you have to wear an astronaut suit, right? If you go to the bottom of the ocean or something, you wear a diver's suit. You go into a hostile environment like where there's fires and stuff, you have to put on some protective gear. Well, whatever we are, we're basically drivers to a genetic spacesuit. And feelings are the equivalent of all the little neat gizmos and knobs and gears, like when you're in a car, that have lights that blink on and off, telling you different things. And the emotions are there to tell you, this is what's going on. And you're supposed to understand that that's information to make a decision. You're not supposed to jump and react to things. That make sense?
Sure, absolutely it does. And I'm guessing that when you had that experience so many years ago and you're going through this process, like, what was it like for you a month into it?
Well, the biggest challenge for me was I going to be able to fully be what I was? Because the largest mental hurdle, and most people, what we could call mental strength and emotional strength, there's no way to really quantify it. But the big challenge there is being able to recognize that you're in a state of progression, that you are wanting to seek, feeling a sense of well-being that's better than where you are now. And as long as that's happening, that's good. But when you're comparing it to where you once were, given where you are, that creates a unique feeling that I call constructive discontent, meaning that you recognize that there's something off, and you're unsettled with it, that unsettledness makes you want to resolve the issue. And that's kind of where I was. Prior to this, like a lot of kids, I would imagine, part of the reasons I use the superhero things, I like comic books and I draw, and I couldn't, even hold anything in my hand to draw or anything, or paint anything, or anything like that. And there were these kids in the hospital that would draw pictures with paints and stuff on the windows. And when I tried to do what I, imagined in my head like I used to, it was spooky because it's like, I can't do this quite yet. But notice how I said that, not yet. I saw the limit, but I didn't see that limit was going to be there forever. And one of the things that I also use as an analogy to help people understand some of how this works is, in an engineering world, with my background with engineering, it doesn't matter what you're making, called a car, a building, a box of some sort, a can. When the actual item is drawn up, that's a concept. But then when it's created in the world, whether it's manufacturing or building, you're catching up to the creation, right? So when I was going through my healing process, I was healing myself knowing that I was catching up to my future that I was creating for myself.
Is that what you think was the key? I mean, just realizing that you're not everything at this current time. I mean, you're looking at every aspect.
Right. You're becoming and always becoming more. And change is inevitable. You cannot fight it. You could try, but it'll smack you on the rear. And the change I was going through was actually something that I'd gone through before. But when you're a baby, you're not cognitively aware of some of these things. So there's like a disconnect, a disassociation, because your body was trained over a period of time to be a certain way. Well, when you break your neck and you have the disconnect, all of a sudden it's like the program memory wipe. This is the mind, even though it once did it, it's like all that memory got wiped out. It's sort of like taking a computer and had a memory wipe on it. And it's sort of like weird because it's like I did this before. Why does this feel like so different? What was once second nature? And this is one of the things I also get into in the book, that our society focuses in all too much on hows. And this is one of the reasons why people don't feel successful in life. They measure their success and what they do based off of being stifled by hows, when in fact how is a process. I had no idea how I was going to fully recover from breaking my neck. I just knew that I was going to. And once I did, then I could tell how. So like if someone loses weight, they did it a certain way. And they can tell somebody, do this, and you should be able to lose the weight that I did. But there's no guarantee, because different people, different chemistries, different body makes, and all these different things. So this is a process that worked for me. You might want to try it. And that person tries that. They kind of try a little bit of something else for somebody, and they create their own mix, and they discover their own how. So how is an after effect? And the big focus needs to be the why. What's the motivation? What is the intention? What's your drive? And that's where, at 10 years old, I was like, it's only me. even though I have these adults that are supposed to be helping me, they're failing me, they're not listening. I'm going to have to pass time in this adult world, but literally this is all an inside job.
You know, and I also noticed as well that you kind of talk about history being rewritten by the victors. You know, I mean, whoever wins the game writes the history. So, and you talk about that a little bit more and connect it with DNA and stuff. And I was wondering if you could discuss that with our listeners.
Well, you know, this is one of the things I recognized early on is that most of what you hear, most of what you're taught, is opinion and theory. And it's not as much really the facts, right? Even, you know, the fact we're speaking the English language and we're having conversation, that was an opinion. You know, a couple grunts, a couple sounds, and, you know, a handful of humans said, okay, this is what this means. And it only applies to those who agree to that language, right? And then if you don't agree to it and speak a different language, you don't understand it at all. But the fact is, once everyone agrees upon it and they start doing it, then they define something and they have an agreement upon it, then it creates sort of like a pseudo-fact. But, you know, the communication is what you get out of it, because, you know, two people can have the same conversation and have a totally different meaning in what they get out of it because of how they define words. So what I was noticing earlier on is history represents his story, meaning the person who wins, the person who is the person in charge or defeats whatever, the person with the title tells their version of the story, and that's the one that's sold. And I noticed this typically, I think it was about this, within 12 hours or so of when I broke my neck. Because when I first broke my neck, they finally figured out that something was goofy. They sent me to the hospital. They didn't do anything at the hospital. They sent me on a flat stretcher. And the next morning I wake up, and, you know, I can't even control peeing in the bed or whatever. And I hear the doctor saying, your son's fine. He can go sled riding, because it just started snowing that day or the day before. And he just stunned himself and he was playing. And I said, oh, so he's telling his story, and he's the guy who is in charge, so people are going to believe him. So people start to go over and over again with that. And then when I was, you know, going through the usual history and classes and stuff in school, I noticed, oh, well, you know, there's always these blue bloods, these people who believe themselves to be bigger and better than everyone else, and they call themselves kings and whatnot. And they say this is the right to rule based off of their DNA. But, you know, the real thing of it is, you know, we all have DNA. And what is it that they're doing different than we're doing different? And if you step back, one of the things they do differently is they work together. They've got each other's backs. They scratch each other's backs and rub each other's toes and everything else. They take care of each other. Now, they still are a version of a den of scorpions, black widows, and pit vipers, because they attack each other. But there's a code of ethics that they all work with. Whereas what they teach us seems to be this enough of a success, enough of a feeling where you can sort of get along, but they focus so much on independence that we hide ourselves away from connecting with other people to make these larger bonds. And there's I think it was a cartoon movie type thing, Disney, I don't know, they had just a couple of them that are similar, and there's like ants and these grasshopper things, and the grasshoppers are talking, and the one says, you know, why do we keep on harassing these ants? And this is, you know, goofy. And the other one kind of beats the other one over the head and says, hey, look, those ants outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. If they figured it out, we couldn't be in charge anymore. And that's kind of the system we're in. And as long as people believe that those who tell us things are telling us the facts, then they're trapped. Then you recognize it's opinions and theories that are sold as facts. Then you recognize you're being sold this illusion that isn't real, and if you connect with it, you make it real by connecting with it. But if you can disconnect with it and shift to that inside out versus that outside in, all of a sudden, all this stuff you're fighting for, all this angst, all these things you're worried about just don't matter. Not to the extent that they used to.
And do you think that when this happened to you, I mean, did it make you closer to source? Do you believe in a divine providence? What's your definition on God? Are you agnostic? What would your take be on that?
Well, I say the typical joke. You know, I grew up in a Roman Catholic family, so I'm still recovering. But it is really funny because, you know, in the Catholic Church, there's a lot of this, you know, guilt and all this shame and stuff like this that they try to push on people, which is it's a bunch of nonsense. It's just another control system. And the thing that I recognized earlier on is that this is another version of his story. Whoever tells the story loud enough and long enough, they believe it. And if they have an authority to it, people will say, there must be something there. And there's a part of the population that needs to have some sort of something to save them because they have no willingness to do it on their own. And so as far as a God force, I refer to it as source, universe. What we live in is basically a expression of the greater whole of whatever creation, the emphasis that is moving us all forward. And there's a duality to it. One of the things that was, fortuitously interesting that fit into my life is prior to me being born, my mother had one of these issues with having pregnancy, and she had a lot of massive hemorrhaging and bleeding, and she had a lot of pain, and she actually had an on-body experience. So she was able to recount this to me, and I started putting some of these pieces together, and I said, okay, so there's this other side and there's our side. They work together, and from what I was taught from her, from this brief experience that she had versus what I would experience in the religious circles and stuff, okay, there's a lot of facts there, but the way that it's said or the way it's explained, a lot of the meaning is lost because of that his story thing. And it's told from a perspective that suits somebody. And it's one of these things that I can't stand. It's like the self-serving issue that people get caught up in. And what I recognize as far as the source is that we basically, everything we're inside is a form of energy. This is something that physics and science talks about now. I mean, we have cell phones that go through walls and all kinds of bricks and mortar and stuff. And to the truth of it, we really don't understand it. We don't work so that we've created it, we've tested it out, and we've replicated it. When you pick up a phone, this goes back to that how and why question. Do you care how the phone works, or do you care why it works? When you pick it up, you want to make a phone call, or you want to text somebody, or get on the internet, or whatever it is that you're doing with your smartphone, right? So the how is sometimes hidden when it's kind of important, and sometimes you're focused in the why, such as like why do I use the phone? Because it serves a function to me. But when you look at the connection with the greater source of whatever's running us, one of the challenges that I think most people face with is they've humanized this source. And by humanizing it, they've minimalized it. And if you have a problem in a store, say you at a restaurant or something like this, who do you go to if you have a problem?
Manager.
Right. You go to the person with the highest control. So why do people spend so much of their time going to a middleman or a talk-between? Anytime you deal with a go-between or one of these gatekeepers in any of these massive companies, it's an end around, it takes forever, you never seem to get a clear story, yet people want to spend so much of their time focusing in on the middleman, the humanized version of the concept of the greater whole, of this source, energy. And if we can understand that we have all of that within us, we're just, a smaller version of it, kind of an expression of it. So when I was healing myself, it's like, if I have this power within me, then that power must be within everything else. And I looked at, before I broke my neck, I cut myself and I healed myself. So, I think I have the choice to make the decision to heal myself. This is a process that will go on a certain level unconsciously because the body is designed to take care of itself, and the other side requires some control of energy. So I recognize how energy works. So if you go to a rock concert or you go to a play, have you heard this term where they say you feel their energy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what they're really talking about...
It's the vibe.
Yeah. So what they're talking about is this, right? When they're able to really express themselves, they're just putting it out. They're being who they are, and the energy goes out. But we've been coded in with a series of fears and all sorts of other things, and that energy is never lost. It has to go somewhere. So if it doesn't go out, it comes back in. And that's where people feel all these illnesses and these things where there's a lot of information out there that says a lot of these cancers, a lot of these other experiences, it's as much the stuff we're taking in our body as the way that we think about things and feel about things. They kind of go hand in hand. And I recognized I had to learn to channel this energy, that the energy was flowing through me. I just had to work with it. And that's one of the reasons why when I have a conversation and speak to people, they say, wow, you have this ability to just have this conversation. It's like, well, I'm not holding myself back. Why are you holding yourself back? And one of the things that I've laid out and I talk about with people is, by the time you're 7 years old, you've been trapped, and you don't recognize you've been trapped. One of the traps is that you believe in the Simon Says paradigm. So you start believing in somebody who's telling you something without questioning it because you've done it for so long, you just start to do it. And anybody who doesn't go along with that program, society starts to go, what's the matter with them? Because they're so ingrained with it, they don't even know why they're doing it. The second thing is fear. We have a level of fear that's given to us because of the third thing, which is creativity. We are told not to be creative. And we start to fear our creativity because of what will happen if we express it. And this actually happens greater from people of our own age than people who are in charge of things. So we kind of corral and sort of limit ourselves and each other through this process. And when we're younger, it's sort of taught to us in a way, and we don't know any better. And so instead of being creative, which is our natural outlet, this energy that leads us, that's part of us, that is part of this greater cosmic connection that we're all part of, God force, if you wish, that we're meant to create things. That's why we can reproduce, right? It's just a level of creation on the physical connection. And because that's stifled, and we're told not to, our creativity is just part of who we are. So we've switched things up. We've said, we're afraid to be creative. Let's make our fears creative. So now all of our fears are highly creative. People have all these crazy fears that are like not real. They're really opinion and theory because they can't express the fact of who they are. They have to express the opinion or theory of what they're told to be. See how it's all, after a while you start to do this stuff, all this stuff starts to link in and starts to dovetail into itself. And that's part of how people get caught up in this stuff. And that's the reason why when a person who doesn't know somebody has a lot of anxiety talking to them because they're internalizing this energy that they're afraid that this person will feel a certain way about them, and they're pushing all of these problems they have inside that they're creating because they can't be who they are with this creativity out of fear, and that's what they're dealing with. And that's where there's a lot of confusion. And people just, in a nutshell, they don't know what they don't know, and this part of existence really has been pointed out to them. And that's why I did what I did, to create this book and everything else that I've been working on for the past couple of years.
So when you read the title of the book, Human Instruction Manual, it's like, wow, that sounds great. That's exactly what I need. Who doesn't need an instruction manual? But, I mean, if you would talk our listeners to just a real brief synopsis on what it is. Like, okay, this book would be for somebody that wants to do this, and it equals this.
Okay, so if you, the basic way I say this, and I outline this also on my website, is we live in a 3D world, right? So if you want to have 3D success, this book helps unlock the success you'll have in the world that you live in. And your 3D success works like this. You have a level of confusion about some subject. It doesn't really matter what it is. On a very fundamental level, in a very basic level, it's all the same. Our life is held up by health, wealth, relationships. And they're co-connected and interchained, and one affects the other. And so because of this, you can't escape that, is the dynamic. So the first thing I'd say is the 3D model is, for success, that you need to discover clarity. So the book lays out a number of topics and covers a lot of different things in a way that's very cohesive. It connects things in and out in various ways to pull people in and to get them to critically think about their decisions they've been making and the way they view things. And then the next thing we do is we start to develop confidence in this new way of experiencing life, because now you have some direction with it. And then you start to do the third thing, which is you start to be able to defeat your shadow self, which is this projected image of who you think you're supposed to be or who you think you are based off of these opinions and theories versus the facts, which is what the book really dives into. And I work on a model that's called the 5 core concepts. And so when I originally wrote the book, it was about 250 pages, and I recognized the second half of the book is such a leap from the first half that if I didn't get a first part of the book out there, people would not be able to really comprehend the second half in a way that they can actually apply it, because the second part of the book really takes into account of a lot of different ways to apply things. So the first part is focusing in on the basics. And the 5 core concepts are choice, perception, awareness, purpose, and application. So you have to be able to embrace choice and what choice really means. You have to be able to shift your perception to see what is happening instead of what you want to see or what you've been taught to see. You have to be aware that you don't know what you don't know, and embrace that this idea that you're so smart is actually what holds you back. And the fourth one being purpose is that, yes, you may have a longer-term goal or some life destiny that you have this purpose that you're going to fulfill, but every moment holds a purpose that is a stepping stone to that greater purpose. And can you work within the moment, knowing that the future is going to happen? There's going to be a cause and effect, and can you walk through that with the idea that if you know that's going to happen, can you just accept the moment and work with it? So that goes into all the concepts and things out there about living in the moment. And then the last one's applications. Like, all these 4 are great, but how do you learn it? So in the book, I have a table of contents, and it basically says, here's what we're covering in this book. And on the very next page, I say everything that's going to be covered in the second book to get people thinking, this is still going to go further. So I want to keep people in that mode of constructive discontent. Like, oh, this is great. I want to know more. I want to really engage this, because one of the things that is covered, really stressed in the second book, for once I get that published and put that out, it's already written, is that people want to go back to sleep. They've spent so much of their life living in sort of this backwardsness that it's comfortable to them, and everyone else wants to do it. And once they start recognizing what's going on, there's a little bit of growth that takes place. And for some people, once it happens, it's like they can't go back. It's like, wow, I can never live the way I used to live. And in the book, I stress in the
you can't come back from the red pill.
Excuse me?
Said you can't come back from the red pill.
Right. So some people try. And so like in the awareness section, I cover in the choice one all kinds of different applications and different things, and you could see how you use choices and how there's a cause and effect relationship. And I go through perception. I say, about this false self and this true self, and how that's related to how you do things. And then I get into these 5 laws. And the reason I called it, the part of this book, the 5 laws, is I recognize I didn't have a language for it for many years, but I could see that there was something that I was connecting to that was greater than what I was taught through my heightened sense of senses. And there's a reason why, like when you lose your sense of sight, all the other senses perk up. When you lose your hearing, all the other senses perk up. There's a reason for it, because all the senses are drawn in to each other. They're intermingled, and they're a whole, but yet they're separate. And it's this kind of unique quantum connectedness that these laws of nature, that I call them also, it never fails in nature. It always works. We've disconnected ourselves from the way this works. And so these 5 laws say, these are our senses. This is why we have our senses. This is why everything in existence, in our existence anyway, has these senses, and we're all hooked up into it. So in essence, when you're talking about like the Matrix or being part of a program or something like that, this literally, our senses are hooked up to sort of like the living internet. And these laws are constantly going on. And if you start to just say, okay, I can't fight this, it's going to be this way, what I try to do with people is, as they read through this, they're going to have these aha moments with, these are conversations I've always wanted to have, but I didn't even know I wanted to have them until I started reading them and I started thinking about things. And what I'm literally doing is I'm time gapping them. I recognize that when I was younger, older people do something that's very unique, and it's not because they're retired. You notice that there's a segment of the people who are retired who get it and they're relaxed. And there's another set of the segment of that's retired that don't get it and die. I mean, they leave their job within a couple of months and they kill themselves, or they like instantly get ill and die of something. Have you ever noticed that?
Are you talking about like when people retire, they just kind of lose their sense of purpose?
Yeah, I mean, there's some people lose their sense of purpose. Actually, some of them will kill themselves. Some of them, they end up having some illness not that far afterward, they die. Right. Whereas there's others that they blossom. And the big difference is this whole concept of these 5 laws, these people in their older age, they stop fighting it, and they just sort of embrace it. And now they're not connected into this BS or belief system we call human society, because they're not forced to live in it so much, and they can be on their own, and now they can actually enjoy life. So the majority of our life, we're trapped. We're owned by our things. You know, one of the things I find interesting is we'll call somebody homeless, but actually they're houseless. They just don't have a box. Their home is, you know, where the heart is, right? They always have a home.
Right.
But they just don't have a box or a house. Well, you know, long before there were houses built, people still had homes, and, you know, they lived in tribes and all sorts of things, right? And so what is it that we're really saying by that? Oh, they're not living in this make-believe we created. And once you own a house, you're still not free. Unless you own the debt on that house, you don't have a mortgage or anything, right? Most people can't pay that off. So the bank actually owns the house, or they're working for the bank. So they really don't own the house, and the house owns them, and the house is owned by the bank, so the bank owns it.
Even if you've got the house paid for, you've still got to pay taxes the rest of your life on the house.
Right.
So.
And if you don't pay the taxes, they can immediately say, oh, we're going to seize your property. So and they created that system, so no matter what, you're hooked. And it's because we all buy into it, way back when we said it initially, that this theory or opinion becomes a pseudo-fact that really isn't a fact. And then we all get caught up in it. And, you know, we all have this yearning to connect with somebody, you know, to be part of this greater connection. You know, I know there are a lot of different lifestyles and sort of different things that, you know, our societies have that we contend with at times, but largely males and females have something that the other portion doesn't. Women provide something for men that man can't provide for himself, and men provide something for women that women can't provide for themselves. And in a natural relationship, one of the reasons why I use this superhero logo is, one, the Human Instruction Manual helps people who want to apply that information, start utilizing what they just read and start paying attention to it and using it. They'll become the superhero they're seeking on the outside inside. And then if you start to form relationships based off of this, they're going to be more natural. You're not going to be pushing. And all of a sudden, when you're in male-female romantic love relationships, you have this natural, amazing love that everyone seeks that, unfortunately, most people are in the dream stage of, and they get disconnected with. And that's some of the other stuff. I've actually been working with a matchmaker, helping some of the clients she has to kind of understand how this dynamic works. And that's an offshoot from the book, but it's also very fascinating.
You know, and also,
it's all related.
Sure. And I'm looking in your book as well, and you talk about the mind, and you explain that in some detail. A lot of people have different opinions on what the mind actually is. A giant piece of flesh that has, you know, creates synapses or whatever. Some people think it's more of your consciousness. How would you explain the mind?
Well, if we take the concept we were talking about earlier, is that we're the driver in the vehicle. And so if you look at a car, you see many makes and models, right? And so this year, they're going to make this year's model of the Chrysler or the Ford or the Honda or the Maserati or whatever, right? So it's branded a particular model, particular year. So that's like when you were born and who you're born to, or what country you're born in, or what ethnicity, right? So we replicate our own situation and everything we designed because the system, it works. So why break the system? So people don't recognize this is why we use these sort of systems. It's not because, you know, someone was ingenious to do it. It's just we're replicating the way we relate to ourselves in the outside world because we're so outside identified because of this human society. And what this happens is if you understand that you're the energy field, so you can call it a number of things. People call it a soul. People call it, you know, this is your life force. This is your spark. You know, whatever you want to call it. And basically, what your energy field is actually this mind. And our body itself is just a very well-constructed transmitter-receiver that transmits and sends energy. And the mind is our relationship with that energy that we connect with to the body. And so the body itself has thinking that it goes through. That's our identity. And that's part of this energy field that we have. It's a unique energy field, so it has its own identity. And then we have these feelings, and these are emotional feelings. These emotional feelings are our connections into all of the systems within our body. And we have these 12 systems within our body, so there's all these various connections that make this whole of a 13. So when I say our mind, we're talking about the thinking and the feeling. And if we look at everything in terms of energy, we look at it in the construct of a battery and the flow of energy going from one state to another state, and the cycling of that. And I get into the cycles in the book and the importance of cycles and how they relate. And basically, thoughts create feelings. Feelings create thoughts. And that, as it's an energetic field that constantly is going on. So the fact that we have feelings and the fact that we have thought is actually letting us know that our mind's in existence. If we couldn't think and we just had feelings, we'd be disconnected from our mind. So this is somebody who has like a mental challenge, right? And their thinking is in line, but they have a lot of emotions, and they don't know how to express them because they don't have the mind to be able to connect with that. I mean, the thinking part of the mind that we've been taught. So that's why you need to have both sides of it. And then there are people in our society which almost are like people who don't have any sense of feeling at all. These are people who could turn around and kill somebody and not think twice. They don't have any connectivity with their emotions. They're so purely driven by thought that they're highly logical like a computer, but they're cold like a computer. So they're not in the full state of mind. They're so caught up in the physical that they're not feeling the existence. It sounds kind of like I'm saying opposite things at once, but I explain in the book, contrast is key. What we say is good and bad, those are just opinions and theories. What you're seeing is there's an opposite to everything that gives you the context of a dimension. And there's the in-between of everything in that creates the context of texture and reality. So we have to have these dualities. And in our world, we're taught there's always these extremes. But if you look at a river, and a river as it flows downstream, the current is fastest in the center. And the reason for that is that's where the balance point is. Everything happens near balance. It doesn't always have to be in center balance. It could be a little off to one side or the other, but that's where all the action happens. When you're stuck to the sides, like politics, right? You're on the left or the right, you don't go anywhere very fast. You're just dredging on the sides of that river, but you're not moving forward. So that's how those kind of connections all intermingle.
Right. And, you also talk about, like, personal inventory, finding out what's important to you, getting everything down on paper, and what you're dealing with. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, I observe this. And if you observe this, or you have observed this, but you haven't recognized this, when you're younger, especially like our old-time movies and stuff too, you notice that there was always the leader, the manager or whatever. They had a secretary, right? So what's the secretary do? They do all the typing work, right? They do all the making it all look pretty stuff, right? But the guy who runs the show, he's writing everything down. He writes his notes down. He speaks his notes. His notes. He tells the secretary, or she tells her secretary, whatever, the people that work for him, do these things. And the reason is like when I had to relearn how to move my fingers, I had to pick up pins, like 1,000 pins, and they had like one little container that had these 1,000 pins in a square, and I had to pick up each pin and put it in these little holes in a corresponding square until I got all of them. I had to do this with my thumb, each of my fingers, on both hands, and keep on doing this back and forth until I covered all my fingers. And I recognized that when you engage your fingers, you're connecting into, this is why touch is so important. You can be touched in a lot of different places in your body and you sense it. But our sense of touch at the tip of our fingers is very important to us. And that's why we can grasp and do so many of the wonderful things we can with our hands. And when you write things down, you're connecting your emotions in the physical world with the non-physical world that is of the mind. And when you're typing it out, you're not doing as many of those motions. That make sense? So this is why there's a level of which creativity, although it would seem is highly present in a technical sense, is also disconnected in the real essence sort of sense of things. It's like we've lost our sense of heart. We can do all these cool things, but we can't feel what we do. But when you start, when you, all the people who did all the writing in the past, when they would set out, when you do goals and all these different things, they tell you always write this stuff down, and it's because there's more of a connection that you yourself feel because you're engaging with it. It's sort of that creative process that when you have a pen and paper and you draw something, right? It's the same thing. Like one of the things I noticed is when I was younger, I did all this drawing. I did like these poster board-sized comics, pictures and stuff like this. And then when computers came out, I was like, I wanted to be a drafter and a designer. I liked all the orthographic drawing and all laying it all out. And it was like the computer, I was like, that just took all the fun out of it. I mean, yeah, you can do a lot more kind of cool stuff that you really couldn't easily do and generate 3D models and all this type of stuff. There's a lot of value to it, but you lost something that you can connect with the pen and the paper or the pencil and the paper.
Right, just that perception of kinestheticness, I mean, the kinesthetic perception, I should say, is important. I agree. And, I mean, with that said, you talk a lot about different philosophies to live by. And when people come to you, what is typically their biggest problem? I mean, you've noticed, is there certain themes that you deal with more than others when people have difficulties in life? I mean, was it with their careers, with their love life? I mean, just confidence or?
Well, first off, everyone has a story. So when you meet somebody, and this is something I tell people, like you recognize when you're communicating, interacting with other people. They were once a child. They had, a life. They've had days that were beneficial to them, days that weren't so beneficial to them. Some people call this good days or bad days, right? I use the word benefit because some days are more beneficial to you than others. I try to gear people towards benefit. And when I have these conversations with people, when I first start to meet them, I try to ground them in commonality. This idea that we're all different has caused a big muck because in reality, without 3 to 5% of our existence is this difference, which means you had some different parents and you lived in different locations, different environments, you went to different schools, you had different experiences. But the body you're in, although it might look slightly different, all functions the same. Even down to the construct of the mind with the thinking and the feeling. It's all the same. So I help people understand you've got your story, and are you going to identify with your story as you and take control of that, or you're going to have this outside-in version of the story where you see yourself as the victim? Can you understand how that works? So then I work with people and help them build the confidence with regards to what it is they're working on. Most people think they need something, that they're lacking something, that they're not good enough. And this is because they don't know what they don't know. They think they know what they know. And I'll explain this in a very interesting way. If you had everything that you wanted, you'd already have everything you want, right?
Right.
And if you did, then you would know how you got it, because you have it. But the fact you don't have what you want and you're still working for it means you don't know how it's going to happen, because that's a process. All you know is your why. So if you understand that, you recognize that this process is going to be unfolding, and you're catching up to this through this process. And where you're going with this is the idea that expectation is actually what holds you back. You think you know how it's supposed to happen when you don't know because you haven't finished it. So you sort of disconnect the energy. When in reality, if you can embrace, like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know, that you can go through and say, I want this. This is what I think I need to do, but life might tell me I need to go this direction. Are you going to, and this is where the book gets in, you're going to start making choices that are aligned with what you want or what you think you want. And gear that towards really what is best for you and your life is directing you. Because if you recognize that you don't know what you don't know, maybe life is giving you what you want, but you're not actually taking it when it shows up. So people use the word lucky. And lucky actually means you're prepared for the moment when it shows up, you know what to do. And so if you start to recognize that expectation is a limitation, expectation in and of itself is not a bad thing. And here's what I mean by expectation. If you want to have a relationship, or you want to have a physical body, or you want to be successful, whatever profession you're in, the idea here is that you expect it's going to happen. but don't identify how it's going to happen. Just know that it will. That allows for you to be creative in the process. That make sense?
Sure, absolutely. And, another thing, too, that I'm thinking about, when you get into your book, you really break down the different steps. You've got 5 different steps, and the first one is intention. And then you break that down. And I was wondering if we could talk about these 5 different steps to really help somebody go to the next level spiritually and also while they're here consciously as well. The first one, intention, program creation. Where do we go from there?
Okay. So, there's all these legends and different stories that, humanity's gone through. And they say, I got the scientists say there's the Big Bang. You have other people say, there was the Word. In order for there to be a Big Bang, or in order for there to be the Word, there had to be a thought. And there had to be a thought to create the bang. There had to be a thought to create the sound. There had to be something that started it all. And that had to have some feeling to it, right? Because the mind has a thought and a feeling. So now we go back to, this is why I stated this earlier in the book, and why it comes into play near the end of the book. And this is why the process, the way I wrote it, is the way it is. So the intent itself is the activation of applying with all of your emotion and all of your thought, a focus. So, people in various realms would call it this like a chief aim or your main focus. And you recognize that anybody who has a directed focus on something, eventually they will get there. There's these stories about people who are highly successful, and they go through this period often where they're homeless or they had to live in somebody's basement or something. You've heard these stories, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what happens is these people were so focused on what they were trying to do, what they wanted to achieve, that they let all this other stuff that human society called important fall away. And they reached the sense of purity to it. And they didn't give up on it because it wasn't happening right in the middle of their faces. See, the reason why, and this is something that is really important here, is that the reason why having the expectation is a limitation is because we can't see what mostly is happening around us, is our limitation. So if we use the idea of a computer screen, right, a monitor, and our world is all about monitors now, right? We're so ingrained in looking in this little computer screen, we forget about everything else that's within our vision and everything outside of our vision. We have this huge planet, right? All kinds of things going on. So, because everything's energy and everything's moving and everything's going through things, whether you can see it or not, because there's these quantum levels of energy, much like how a cell phone works, right? We have these Wi-Fi's everywhere. It goes through everything. So it's there. We know it's there. There's all these different forms of light that come in. There's a full spectrum of light, and there's the visual range and all these other things. So we're in this soup of energy all the time. But the way we're coded is a lot of that is refined out through our vision, and we're only seeing a small part. So the intention links in with how this works and says, okay, this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to focus in on. We're going to channel our emotions to this so that we have a stake in the game, that because it can be made inside of me, it can be made externally. And the way that it happens externally is never the way you think it's going to happen internally, because there's that sense of duality. Like, you have to believe in yourself, but you have to believe in the system that you live in, because both are real and both are there. If the outside world didn't exist, you wouldn't exist, right? That continuum is there. So you have to have the belief that the outside world, God, creation, source, whatever you want to call it, it's going to do its part. Then you have to do your part. And you have to have that belief and balance. So that intention moves things forward, understanding you're moving through that, and you're letting it go wherever the energy is going to go. And this is where people have a problem, because they think they know, or they listen to their friends, or they listen to their family, or they listen to their social connections, their religions, their political affiliations, their book club, whatever it is that they listen to, right? And the thing about it is unless these people have exactly what you want, anything they tell you is an opinion or theory based off of their experience, and if their experience isn't giving them what they want and isn't something that you can get, then you actually are listening to something that's not going to take you anywhere. So let's say you want to be a famous painter, or you want to be a doctor, right? A painter or a doctor would not go to a tennis pro to learn to be a painter or a doctor, right?
Right.
But yet we'll talk to our friends and ask their opinions or theories on things. It's like wasted time, wasted space. So what I do is I say I have designed engineered mentoring for a fulfilling quality life. I have the evidence and proof from my own experiences of everything that I'm talking about. And I can relate it and give people a process that is a blueprint that is something that never fails for everyone. They have to come up with their own version of their experience. They have to do their part. You have to show up. But once you show up and you follow the way this works, then things start to happen. And this following up is the intent. And that's why intent is connected to our physical sense, because that's the majority of who we are. We have the other four senses, but they're not as dominant as the sense of feeling, because intention is so very important. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And I've even seen photographic evidence of what happens when you can use your intent with words on water molecules underneath microscopes. I've seen images where I can't remember this gentleman's name, but he's basically a monk, and he would say to one piece of water, like there'd be a glass of water, and he would say, "I hate you." And he would put a piece of tape that says "I hate you" on it on the glass of water and leave it there for a week. And then he would say to the next glass of water, "I love you." And he would write "I love you" on a piece of paper, put it on the glass. And if you'd look at the molecules underneath a microscope, the one that he said "I hated you" to looked like, almost cancerous. It looked nasty and diseased. And the one that he said "I love you" to looked like a nice snowflake.
Exactly. So this energy field is in everything. So everything you have, and this is where we're going back to sort of in the beginning of the book, as you stated, I lay out a lot of basic concepts. Like, these are things that if you got to wrap your mind around a little bit differently. Yeah, how you feel about them, how you think about them, and you recognize that most matter, as you pick something up, it has a wavelength to it, but it also carries within that wavelength a frequency. And that frequency is that energy pattern that you're able to input into it. So water is water, right? So in that instance, you have water's water. Water will be water. But the one has the energy imprinted with it that it carries of the uplifting energy, and the other one's the stagnating energy, right? And so the molecules of water hold that energy. So you can't deny it. And so this is where when people, when I started going through this experience on a book connect, I thought to myself, this is all going to take care of itself. I don't care how. I just know that it will. And I'm not going to stop improving in any level until I get where I need to go. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that to the next step. Because I know this energy is in me, and I know this energy is working through me, and only I can stop it. What is really strange, because most people are told that it's the outside forces that cause all your victimhoods and all your problems and challenges, right? And this is why everything that we see in media, in TV, movies, they try to set it up where the hero or whatever the system is that is going on in the storyline, that there's something that just controls everything. Well, in essence, you control almost everything. And it's hard to believe because you're not taught from when you're very young that's the way it is. And in the book I say, and this is something I'll clarify real quick here, and this goes in with the attention too, that if there's another side, which my life experience and my mother proves that there is, that we came here with an intention. That's why we exist. And that's the reason why you have a seed of a plant, and you call this plant a tomato plant, right? So you take that tomato seed, you plant it, and its intention is to be a tomato plant. It can't be anything else but a tomato plant. Just like your intention is to be you and to go through your life experience. Cool. You can't deny being you. So that's your intention. So now live your life, and don't worry about all this other stuff that people shackle you with, right? You're in control of it. It's literally that simple. Nothing stops the tomato plant from being a tomato plant, and it has the intention to grow. If it can, right? And if it can't, it can't, and it just doesn't happen. And that's the same thing with us. If we give up on ourselves and it can't happen, then we hold ourselves back and we wither away.
And then you talk about the law of service and program growth. What does that, exactly entail?
Okay, so the nuts and bolts of this is I want to clarify what service is and isn't first. Service is something in which your energy is moving out from you. So that energy has to provide some use to something else. Otherwise, things can't grow and continue on. And so the idea here is like we were talking about plant, and so the tomato plant. It serves to give a fruit, we call a tomato, to the world that uses that fruit to sustain whatever eats it. And in the process, that the seeds of the tomato are ingested and passed through, and then tomato plants can be otherwhere, right? But it serves a purpose, and by serving its purpose, it continues itself. So with us, we will continue to live and live a fulfilling life as long as we provide service to others. So this idea of money is a value proposition. If you can boil it down to the basics and the reality of it, is that money is a tool and it is reflecting what people value. It doesn't mean that it's something that is worth valuing. It just happens to be that's where the value system of our society currently is, right? And that's where the energy is going, and that's where the flow is going. That's the service. So the service is about putting that out there. But there is some stipulation to this because women are typically challenged with this, and some men too, is that there's the idea to serve, but don't support yourself. In order to give service, you must be able to support yourself. So in order for that plant to give that fruit of the tomato, it has to be able to do the things it does to grow to make the tomato, right? So much like us, our sense of taste serves us to nourish ourselves. If we weren't nourished, we wouldn't have the energy to serve others. And what stops this is service to self, which is where you exceed your own capacity for self-supporting ends, and you're taking more resources than you need at the detriment of others. So others are stifled, and you're doing a disservice to them because you're service to self. And that connects in with our sense of taste. And this is why you will say something like, and this is stuff I noticed when I was growing up, is like, oh, that guy left a bad taste in my mouth. Or this situation just didn't taste too good, right? And I was like, what is this essence about taste with something that we're not eating? I really had a hard time with quantifying that until I was able to say, oh, this is what service is the link, and learning the language of how to explain this. But once I did, now I understand why we use these essence words with experiences. And did you ever notice that before I said this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's different sensory perception words that I notice people use often, and that a lot of times I think correlates with if they're a kinesthetic person or a visual person or auditory. So, yeah, that's fascinating. I think that's pretty cool. And, and then you get into law number 3 and allowance, the law of allowance, being more than just free will or free expression. And let's get into that.
Okay, this is fascinating. This of all the 5 laws is actually the most difficult for people because we've been taught about free will, but allowance takes free will to a totally different level. And law of allowance links into what we can connect with a sense of scent. So when you sweat, you have your own sense of smell about you, right? That's your identity. And so if you eat some foods that are like toxic, or your health is bad, and you like have a flu or something, you'll have that like not so good smelling part of the body, right? And that's who you are at that time, right? It oozes out of you. That's who you're allowed to be because of what you've contained and what you've done, your decisions. Whereas if you've eaten well and you exercise well and you got all those toxins out of you, and that's really a good thing. And most people don't know this, and I learned this when I was a teenager. I thought it was fascinating. It's another reason why maybe, oh, I get this. I think it's over in Europe, maybe it's Greece or something like this, but as kids hit teenage years, the males will actually take a handkerchief and put it on, sort of wipe their armpits with it, and they'll like whip it around in the air to get their scent out there. So the woman, so that the woman can like, oh, this is who this guy is, and it goes down to this level that the way that the sense of scent is, you can't avoid it. So like a banana smells like a banana. You see a banana, they all smell the same, right? You see apples, you can have different colored apples, but apple's an apple, right? Same thing with oranges and any other fruit. But that identity must be preserved. So it's just like, the acorn is going to turn an oak tree. It can't be anything else. It has to be preserved to be what it is. So you have to be allowed to be what you are. So where free will gets confusing, this is where it's tough, is people say, well, I have free will to be what I want to be, but then I start placing all kinds of expectations on somebody else. And then I start taking their allowance away from them. So they're not allowed to be fully who they are. They're only allowed to be who they are with the degree to which I have these expectations. So when you want to achieve something and you have these expectations, and I say don't connect with a particular outcome, then when you meet somebody in a relationship, any relationship, business, friends, whatever, you're not placing that concept of allowance and limiting them. You're allowing them to be who they are. So you may meet somebody who doesn't look or appear or come to you any way that you've ever known before. But because you allow them to be who they are, they can give you the value you need in whatever that relationship is, because you didn't expect them to death with all kinds of limitations. And this is where people have a hard time with it, because they want to be allowed to be who they are. If they can get themselves to that point where they connect with their inside self versus this external false projected image that people put out, and connect with another person, that's where there's a challenge, because they want to limit somebody else. So in religious sectors, there's this concept called sin, or in other realms, there's always this sort of this connotation that means something bad is going to happen, or something unpleasant or unbeneficial is going to happen to you because you go down this path. And what it's basically saying is this: law of allowance must always be preserved. And when you go against the law of allowance, you're taking the freedom away from that existence to be allowed to be what it is. So this is where the idea that to kill yourself is a bad deal. It's very non-beneficial to you. And I know when I say good and bad, it's followed up with beneficial or non-beneficial, because what it is it's basically saying you were intended to be here. Creation wanted you to be here for a certain reason. So if you were intended to be here and you take yourself out, you took the creation's freedom away from itself to allow you to be, because you serve the purpose. Now that you've taken yourself out of the game, God, source, creation, whatever, universe, whatever you want to call it, now the longer term plan that it has for everybody, because people connect with other people and people affect other people. So if you take one person out of the system, now the system has to readjust to allow for that, because the ends of the overall intention of the creation of why you're created to live still needs to be there. Does that make sense?
Agent Smith has to come out multiple times and try and adjust things, basically. Yeah, absolutely doesn't.
Right. And this is why these archetypes of things sort of like pop up. And this is really why I created this, because it's like when you start to think along these terms, all of a sudden everything gets sewn together. Now you can see why in experience that once something happens, there are a series of critical events that everybody can feel this overwhelming energy shift. And so in a relationship sense, let's say one of the partners, doesn't matter if the man or the woman, they decide to go rogue. That's my term for this, go rogue. In other words, they had a relationship, say a romantic relationship of some sort, and they go rogue. And when they go rogue, they're pulling away from the intention, the unified intention, and they're doing their own thing. They're allowed to do that. But now their allowance isn't in sync with the allowance of what you're trying to produce being in a relationship, right? And that's why you feel that energy disconnect, because now the allowance is not in sync with each other. And you can feel that energy difference. So these are why these things, we can feel them, we can notice them, and you can't avoid them. Now I'm giving context as to why they're there. And if we can understand why these things are there, then we can start working with them instead of against them.
And
if you notice, this is something that I bring up to people who want to have the greater conversation, and I cover it in the second half a lot more depth. You notice that 2 and 3 form the what you would call in three-dimensional space the Y-plane, right? Where it's the nose and the mouth go up and down.
Right.
So if you have a target, it'd be the on crosshairs, it'd be the up and down part. Well, to create your coordinate connection is your other senses of sight and sound, which are left and right on the x-axis. And your feeling, which is the intention, is the z-axis, your motion through it. Interesting, isn't it?
Oh, it's very interesting. And is that why you put together law number 4, balance, to kind of just integrate everything in harmonious fashion?
Well, balance is such a word, it's such a concept that really is not fully understood by most people. It's a very indirectly thrown word around. As an example, if you've ever had an inner ear infection or you had vertigo, you do not have a sense of balance. You can't barely move. You get up. You can try to connect in with what's going on, but you're totally out of sync with it. And that's the same thing that happens if you swimmers here. You get water into one ear, right? It interferes with the balance. So let's look at this in context of something that we can all relate to. You have a checking account. It has a balance in it, right? What does that balance mean? It means there's a certain amount of something. Well, time is a balance. Our lifetime is our balance in existence. And we're going through that. And we hear through sound, which is something that's not physical. This is wavelength. And it passes through everything, right? So what it is we are in tone with balance, which is the harmony of existence. This is why we say in nature there's harmony, because nature has its own sense of balance. So if you go into a very secluded, quiet space, you'll notice that you'll start to hear one of two things. You'll hear your heart and your lungs maybe moving, but if you can drown that out, you'll hear what is a sound, a ringing in your ears, that most people think is the sound of the absence of sound. But that is the harmony of the tone that never stopped ringing, that we're all connected into.
Okay.
And when you go through things, we've already talked about intention. So if you have an intention that is focused on service, and you allow people to be who they are, and you allow yourself to be who you are, and you follow that intention to the service, it's going to take a balance of time for you to accomplish that intention. That's why it follows through in this pattern, right? And the balance is, when I was talking about when an engineering project comes up and they're going to build a bridge, they have all the drawings and they get all the materials and they start building, right? They know that at some time that bridge is going to be built, so they're catching up with that balance of time. And see, when we were talking earlier about somebody dies or kills someone or they kill themselves, and somebody's taken out of the experience of living on this side of the plane of existence, and they're out. All of a sudden, there's a vacuum for their balance. And that's why there's a shift, because everything has to take up and reshift and orient balance to account for that particular item in the whole scheme of things to happen. So one of the things people, when they're putting on expectations, and when I say don't connect to expectations that you know the outcome, expect there will be an outcome, but be willing to accept the way it's creatively brought to you. One of the things I tell people and try to help them understand is that there's this idea that you receive everything you need and most of what you want. Unfortunately, you don't recognize it because you connected what you think it was versus what it was. So when it comes to this idea, I'm sure you've done this before. You thought about a song that isn't a top 40 song or a particular TV show, and you're flipping around and on the dials and you pick it up, right? You've done that before, right?
Almost every day.
Okay, so that's you connecting in with this sense of balance. Basically, it's saying you have the intent, you put it out there. You just want it serves purpose to you. Either it's going to bring you joy, or you're going to learn something, or you're curious about something. You're allowing yourself to connect with it and allowing it to be you because it's going to serve some sort of purpose. So there's this balance that takes place. So it's easy to expect something to happen when you don't connect with a time frame to it. So you let the balance roll out. And a song or something that's recorded is something that it's very easy for the universe to bring to you. So it's like, say you want apple, right? Well, it's pretty easy to find apples. So you're going to be able to find where apples are. But if you say something with specificity, that you want this particular house, and it's got to be in this particular location, and it's got to have these particular things, all of a sudden you're whittling down the specifics so much so that you're limiting the pool of the number of houses that you can pick from, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, that means that you're putting so much expectation on the universe that it may take a while for you to find what you're looking for. And that balance may take a lot longer than you think. So what happens is people say, oh, I want to meet my soulmate. And they got these ideas about what their soulmate is. And I tell people, you can have your list of 50 things you want about whoever you're going to connect with. But if you could focus on the top 5, be willing to be open to, a lot of these other things, allow those people to be who they are, yeah, you can have your list of, like, these are non-negotiables. These things, I don't want these lifestyles, and, these things don't jive with my allowance, and I got to find things to do. And then people will randomly meet somebody all the time that would be a great match for them. See, the thing of it is it's not like it's shown to us on like TV, and the man isn't doing some kind of pickup artist thing, and the woman is actually, aware of what's going on and not willing to just put the guy in the friend zone, right? See, women put guys in the friend zone because they have so many guys after them, they've got to find a way of just sort of like pushing things off so that they can figure out who they really like. But if they stop doing that and say, well, maybe some of these guys that I push in the friend zone are actually the ones I want, all of a sudden they open up a whole pool that they never even recognized. Plus, if they could say, hey, the guy is not going to come the way that I expect, and actually he may not hit on me, he may just talk to me, because he's opening up the door and he wants to see if we're going to take a dance, right? So the reason why dance and relationships, it's this push and pull, this shifting of the balance, each person doing their part in the dance. And so like in a relationship, if one person or two people meet, it requires both sides. And this is why I tell guys, I say, guys, all this pickup artist stuff and all this macho type stuff, it's good for having something that's self-serving, but it's never going to go anywhere. If you want to have something that's going to mean something, it's going to take you somewhere, and you're going to connect and make something that's going to be significant, mean something, and go places, and far beyond anything you can think or imagine it to be, you're going to be in this relationship where it happens naturally, and the woman figures it out. Because women have been socialized to be so much chased after that it's really only when they make the decision to chase the guy that it actually will work out. And you can look at a lot of these movies and things like this, you'll notice that always in the romantic comedies, it's a woman who it makes the deciding factor to do something that switches it up. And it's the guy who, bumbles through it trying to get her to figure it out. And sometimes it happens in reverse with the guys, but, basically how we're socialized, that kind of peers us into that.
Oh,
and that's
right.
kind of an
Absolutely.
example of and that gets us into that. That's how this whole balance thing works, is we recognize, if there's a male, female, those are the two poles of the existence. So if they're going to do a dance, it's an energetic dance, and they both do their part. And this is one of the things I'll tell people. I'll ask them, I'll say, you want to meet people, and you're single. Have you ever danced before? No. They're highly, conscious of dance, and they're very uncomfortable with the body. I say, okay, I suggest you go to like group dance classes, and you're going to connect with and touch all kinds of different people, and you're going to learn how you do your part, they do their part. And this is why men and women appreciate someone who can dance and kind of move their whole body. It's like, hey, if they can move their body, then if we're in a metaphorical dance in our thinking or in emotions or in physical connection, we know they can sink in with it. And now can both of our energies sink in? Can we do this dance? And that's how this balance thing goes, because the balance goes left, right, or up, down, or whatever you want to call it. And there's a flow to that. Notice how it goes up and down. It creates flow, and flow is motion. And motion is moving forward.
Right.
So when we think of balance, we're just thinking of this like balance scale. It's going nowhere. No, balance is motion, of movement, and change, and all kinds of things that are moving forward.
Okay. So you're kind of integrating everything there. I like that too, because it's kind of the give, take, the yin, the yang, the light, the dark, the balance, everything. It all evens itself out. That's pretty cool. And, and that brings us to the last step you talk about, and that's the law of attraction, basically. And I know that many people that listen to the Leak Project and are subscribed to our channel here at YouTube, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord, probably know about The Secret and the law of attraction and Rhonda Bryan. And I think what you put together is great, because you kind of leave this at the very end to cap off everything else. And I was wondering if you could discuss it with us and talk about how you would use that interjected with everything else to make it work the best as possible.
Well, first off, I expressed earlier on this idea of brilliance and believing you're so smart, if you can embrace your stupidity and what you don't know type thing. So some people have had some successes with The Secret and the concepts of that. But if you listen to it, most of like The Secret of the movie and all that type of stuff has to do with a bunch of people giving their opinions and theories, where they're not really focusing in on the facts. And why people largely, in huge numbers, don't believe in the law of attraction is because they are only experiencing 20% of the laws if they're focusing on the law of attraction itself. So it's like the world's greatest cookie recipe, and there's 5 main ingredients, and all you're tasting is the dough. Right? It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And this is why some people have a hard time with it. And these other 4 are work in conjunction with the law of attraction. And then law of attraction itself, people have this, they'll say this, I believe in the law of attraction. Well, there's another hook up there, another challenge point. And see, you don't believe in it. It is. It's not something that you have a belief system about. It's an energetic connection, right? So when you're talking about this law of attraction, in the essence of that water example you talked about earlier, when you put in a beneficial, life-giving feeling, you are attracting that experience to that water. And then when you did the opposite, you detracted from that, pulled from that, you are attracting the opposite from that water. And so what most people don't recognize is they're caught up so much in setting out counter intentions. And see, when you start to get to the law of intention, again, you sort of notice that for there to be an attraction, the attraction has to have another intent, right? So for you to be hungry, and your body says, okay, I'm hungry. So now your intent is to find food, okay? And what are you attracted to? Food. What tastes good to you? What's going to serve your need? That type of thing. You see how that kind of works? You can't escape it. And these other parts are often, and I'll tell people, so you hear all these different onsets of, this is my 6 whatevers, and this is my 7 thises, and this is my 3 thises, or the 5 that. And I say, often what they're doing is they're taking a level of a human concept and connecting with the 5 laws and catching some of them or replicating some of them. One example that dovetails the law of attraction in the sense that correlates to one of these examples that is actually someone who nailed it on the head but didn't even know he was doing it was this guy who has the 5 love languages. And each of these 5 love languages can be traced back to a particular need, a particular feeling, and a particular law. And so he goes ahead and says, this person is more geared towards this and that. Well, actually, that's their preference based off of not recognizing all 5 and not recognizing all 5 exist and all 5 exist in other people. So we have this focused way that we're taught that doesn't tell us the whole set of facts, but a lot of these opinions and theories. And then based off your experiences, then you get comfortable in these certain ranges. So when you have this law of attraction, you say, I want somebody in my life in a romantic setup that appreciates the things I do. So they listen to what I say and they acknowledge my words, right? So this is what he calls affirmation, okay? Well, affirmation would connect into, that's a sound thing. That's a balance issue. And that has to do with balance. So this person wants to know that they're significant in terms of where they are in their life at that moment. And they need to be taught that because that's that law, they're hooked up on that. They're not paying attention as much as the others. That makes sense? See how there's a direct relationship to that?
Sure.
And this is why they're attracted to that because that's something that's important to them. And let's say in their life, they were never really given a lot of affirmation. And so that's what they seek. And then what happens is then that person will give affirmations to others because they value that so much, in hopes that by giving affirmations to others, that the person will get it and say, oh, this person might like me. This is why you might be with somebody who tries to, in a conversation when 2 people meet, and they're trying to say, hey, I like the way you did such and such when I saw you interacting, doing whatever. And they're trying to affirm that person because they feel affirmations are important to them. And they're putting that affirmation out there because they're wanting a ping. They're wanting that dance to put that ping back in their court by affirming them. That way, if they get an affirmation back, they're going to feel comfortable and they're going to let their guard down. So that's kind of an example. And
Sure.
you know, 5 love languages. Let's see, they have you're spending time. There's gifts and touch. All, you know, there's a handful of different things. And so, law of attraction. What you want wants you. That sounds great, but most people don't understand how much counterintention they're putting out. And this is one thing that once I lay out everything in the first book, second book, once I have enough people get out there and get the first book and get people really getting involved with it, I get that second part of that book and they'll really be able to take it, because basically I interact all these 5 laws and I say, so you think you know attraction, you think you know these concepts, so let's like really dig into this, like we're having in this conversation, to the point where this is why a lot of these motivational and inspirational type of people blow hot air into people, and I call them the juice factory guys, because they're putting out a lot of. And the reason I call them the juice factory guys is because they have to go back to get juiced up from it. They're like drug addicts, and I've actually heard these people in the most arrogant fashion say, I'm giving you a problem, you have to come back for more, and what they're really doing is being a salesman to a feeling, and they're selling a feeling to people. They're not really selling them anything they can do, and that's largely because for every intention that they're working with when they do their thing, they're teaching a lot of counter-intentions that undo everything. But they themselves don't know it, because they don't know what they don't know, because no one pointed out to them. But they're still, people say, this guy's making a ton of money. Well, let's see. He's doing it because he's a salesman. So, do you want to be a salesman? No, I want to be, the best mother there is. Well, focus on paying attention to the best mother there is instead of trying to be a motivator like the salesman.
Right.
And it's your focus. And this is why the law of attraction really confuses people, because you will attract that which you're around, and people will gravitate to people that they're comfortable around, which is everything but what they want to achieve. So, some people who are, a law of attraction is largely focused in on acquiring things, or like relationship type things. And so if you look at that concept, people don't understand that when bad things or consequential, non-beneficial things happen, or you're alone, that's actually a very good thing. And here's why. If you're with somebody and their allowance isn't allowing you to be who you are, you're being stifled and they're taking up your energy. So if you're alone, you're available and you can connect with somebody. If you're having what seem like tragedies, it's the universe doing something for you, because it's not going to happen the way you expect. Let's say you're someone and you want to have a greater income, right? And you lose your job, and you go through all this horrendousness that goes in with losing a job. Well, you don't recognize that when you're putting out that intention, first it starts off with the intention, I want to have more money. It was impossible for you to get more money at the job you had, so the job you had to be eliminated for you to have the opportunity to get the job that makes you more money. So what service are you going to provide that'll connect with that other connection? So you start to seek that out, and then you'll bump into somebody, or someone will bump into you, that'll offer or have an opening for something. And most people, there's this internet, there's Monster, and all these job posting sites and stuff like this. You'll find what's really interesting is that the majority of jobs that people get are through other people that they didn't plan for what they were connecting with. And it's because law of attraction was in place, and it said, here, this is what you wanted. This is what we can provide you with what you want. And this is where if you put expectations, you limit it. And this is why somebody could be out of job for 6 years, because they put so many crazy limitations on what they want, that if the universe can't really wave its magic wand and make it happen in a time that's conducive to you. Where if you're very general and say, I want a job that gives me this, this, and this, and connect in with a feeling and the thought of what that's going to be like, then the universe can adapt to that and give you something if you're willing to be creative so that you can connect with it and have it.
That's kind of the opposite of what a lot of people say too. And, they'll say, well, if you want something, you got to say exactly what you want. You want to get it in such detail, imagine it exactly the way that you want it. And I can see what you're saying, where if you go to that extent, it's going to definitely take longer in certain circumstances. First, get your feelers out there, find something close that you're going to be harmonizing with, and then you can grow from there.
Well, here's where we're going to dovetail into something. Remember I said you have to have a belief on the outside and the inside.
Right.
Well, here's where allowance comes in, right? So if you say allowance is related to your belief, and the way that you allow yourself to connect with the reality that you're in. Okay? Call that whatever belief construct you want to. If you want something that's highly stringent and it's got to be this certain way, your believability in it happening is going to fall. And if you can't believe it to happen, there's no reason why you're going to be sending out a signal strong enough to the universe, God, creation, source, whatever you want to call it, to pick it up, to start manifesting it in some fashion, to start putting forth the energy to shift the balance of people's, places, things, events to make it happen. Because you don't believe the outside source is going to do it. And this is why this whole idea of dreaming big is a counterintention if you can't work with it properly. Because people say, oh, I want to be a multi-zillionaire, and I never was a multi-zillionaire. Well, did you try, let's earn $10,000 more than what I was making before? Can you get that to happen? Can you believe you got that to happen? Okay, go up again. This is why most people who become very financially well off, it's an incremental step. It takes them 10, 15, 20 years, right? And one of the reasons why people that live in old money, where people have money for a long time, is if you're brought up in a family that has millions of dollars, are you going to doubt that that's possible? No, you're around it all the time, so you believe it. So for you to go out to the world to make $10 million when you live in a family that has $100 million, that's something you could believe because you're around it. See what I'm saying?
Sure.
But if your belief isn't in that experience level, you're not going to believe that the universe is going to do what it's going to do its part, and you won't believe in yourself to be able to be aware of it, to do your actions required on your behalf to follow through with it. And this is where that's why I said a lot of these things that people are taught with a law of attraction leaves a sour taste in their mouth. They're only focusing on what that part of it was, but all of these other four things come into it. And the idea of ratcheting up your belief will increase your ability to attract. And you have to be able to do it in baby steps, right? There was a time, you ride a bicycle, right?
Oh, yeah, big time, avid cyclist.
Okay, so because you're an avid cyclist, there was a time before you got on a bike that you couldn't ride a bike, right? And when you saw a bike, you had ideas about what it was to ride a bike. But then once you got on it, you had to learn there were different things about it than what it was the way you thought it was, right? You didn't know what you didn't know until you were there,
right.
And you still had to learn how. And it took a while for you to figure out how to really do it till then you can actually do it. Now you ride a bike. Why? Because you enjoy it and it does something for you, right? And you can see all these concepts that we're talking about, it's all related into it. Here's a simple example. So what people, I help them cure themselves to is the idea of you're working with me will help you recognize that I'm going to lead you down a path that's something you're not going to recognize. But it's going to lead you to what you want because it is going to be something that you had expectations removed, and we can refocus your expectations to work for you instead of against you. And I get this idea of what you expect the outcome to be, and it needs to be a certain way. People will I'll up and spend my life following around, let's say band groupies. They want to play music, right? And they think by being around somebody who plays music is going to make them better, right? Well, there's truth to that, but did they learn the basics of how to play? Did they spend a lot of the time learning the basics? So you can hang around a band all you want, and maybe they're successful, maybe they're not. But if you can't learn the basics and master the basics, you can't translate that basics into something else by being around somebody else. And then you have to ask or incite to be mentored by them. So when we were talking about the old folks, I noticed that a lot of old people who would be excellent mentors are burned out. And by burning them out, we're destroying awesome resources. I really think that there's a reason why people in their older, retired years connect to teenagers is because those people in those years should be the mentors to teenagers. Having somebody who's 10 years older than you who just got out of college a couple of years ago teaching you how to live is backwards.
Well, I mean, I mean, absolutely. I'll tell you, I look at, my grandpa, he passed away last year, but I looked up to him more than anybody in the world. And, he grew up in the Depression, just a very honorable person that did everything he could to give his family absolutely everything that they should have on a school teacher's salary. He gave 10% of his money to the church that he believed in. My grandma didn't even leave the house. She was a domestic engineer, she was a good housewife, and yet he was able to take care of everybody. And if he had $10, it'd make it last the whole week. I mean, top ramen to this guy was a gourmet meal. He'd take a candy bar and break it into 3 pieces and eat it, 3 different times. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to that. That's a good point.
Yeah. And that's really what I'm trying to do here. In essence, I through this engineered mentoring is I'm trying to reestablish the idea that teaching what we know is facts from experience, evidence, and proof. To be able to share our lives and what we've been able to do with it, so we can time gap people. Why have them live 20, 30, 40 years and just start to figure it out? Why isn't it we can't, what I call front load people? We can give them all the information that this is the way, the keys to the kingdom, this is the way it works. You're still going to have experiences. You're still going to have your successes and failures, because life gives you successes and failures. Why? Because it helps teach you what you want and don't want, so that you can better refine what it is that you do want. But it doesn't have to be so specific. That you learn that as you're doing this, you're really wanting to connect to emotions. And that the disconnect that we largely have in society is that we don't really talk about how we really feel about things. Men and women are the same. Especially when I was working as a matchmaker, they'll say, I've had this concept, and I've learned about by the matchmaker because, she has all these clients, and say, men and women, are they really the difference? No. Within the first 2 or 3 minutes of a man meeting a woman or a woman meeting a man, whether they meet each other or they're observing each other, they're checking each other out. Women are just as much involved in the physical looks as men are in the physical looks to each other. Okay, what's the next thing that can kind of follow in with that? Within a conversation with somebody, they start looking, if they're interested sexually, they'll start looking at the lips, and they'll try to imagine what a kiss is. This is because the easiest connection is the physical. The mental, the thoughts and the emotions, that's the scary part. That's the part where most people don't understand themselves, let alone be able to share that with themselves. How could they share that and connect it with somebody else? So that's what I help people when I work with people who are seeking with relationship challenges is how can we develop this relationship with ourselves so that you're open, that you don't have any hang-ups about expressing how you feel about how you connect with somebody and how something moves you, where your feelings sent you a message and it took you to a different place because of it. And the thoughts that you had associated with that. And the thoughts usually connect with a creative sense that see possibilities. Because I help people unlock the potential that I see in them. And because I can see the potentials, I work with that. And the word potential means you have the ability to. Are you going to do it? So can we help people reach a potential that's within them? If they themselves can recognize it within themselves, then they can step out of their own way, recognize that they've been in their own way, but they didn't know any better. The people who taught them didn't know any better. And we stop this problem, what I call the systemic challenge of human society. We talked about mortgages and houses earlier on. They work off of compounded interest, right?
Right.
And you also have investments. Investments work off of compounded interest. But without this mentoring process, with this disconnect of the facts and opinions and theories, human society for so long has worked off of compounded ignorance. And that compounded ignorance is why, although technically we should be at this point in an equivalent state on a soul level, a spiritual level, a thinking, a feeling, a mental level, we're disconnected on a physical level and we're out of pace with it because we have this compounded ignorance. If we could unwind that compounded ignorance and change the way that dynamic works, and we could slowly bring people about into the difference, within a generation or two, this world will not look like it is now. It wouldn't work the way it works now. It wouldn't function the way it works now. People would not put up with a lot of these weird, bizarre control systems that are very indirect and direct. We would work with each other so much more, and we wouldn't see life in scarcity, we would see abundance, and collaborate on how to create more abundance. Most of what we see as a lack or scarcity is a management issue done to create that impression so that you're willing to give away rights or freedoms of yourself to somebody else because they can promise you something that you think they have the control. But which fact, like one of the craziest things, I'm sure you probably know this, and probably your audience does too, is like diamonds. There are oodles and bazillions of diamonds. They're like everywhere. And you watch these movies like Blood Diamond or whatever, they have like vaults full of diamonds, and they leak out handfuls of time. Because it's like, yeah, that thing looks pretty. But if we let it out like we really should, like it is in nature, we wouldn't need these like fake diamonds because the diamonds would be like freaking everywhere. And it's the same thing with a lot of things that we create these constrictions on resources. And so where I don't believe in this juice factory method, all of these things in the Human Structure Manual and the offset courses that I have on my website and any other conversation I can help people with. I can work with a person, a group, a business. It doesn't matter what it is. You tell me what it is you want to accomplish. Therefore, we're working on your intent. Then we can direct all the information in that focus. And when I have these conversations and we're doing these things, this compounded ignorance starts to dissipate. People start to let go a little bit. And it takes a while. And it takes a little bit of digestion of it. And then it starts to peel away, and people go, wow. And then, like you said, the red pill or the blue pill. Do I want to remember or do I want to forget? Oh, yeah. I see the value of remembering. And a mentor is what? Can you think of one word that a mentor is?
Teacher.
For somebody. Right. And that teacher does what? They form an example. If we served our life to be an example of what's possible for others in what we do, how we act, in all manners, people would recognize if one person could do it, so could another. That if one person could do it effortlessly and not be self-serving, so could I. And then people could actually attach to that as a reality versus the lack of that. And law of attraction, as we were talking about before, is people focusing on the lack of things. They get caught so much on the lack of not having that they're putting out the counterintention of lack. Because what's weird is humans created the idea of absence. There never was nothing. There's always been something. And the idea of no, not, don't want, whatever you want to call it, when you say these things, when you don't put things in terms of the affirmative, the universal construct does not understand a no. It only wants to grow and is yes-driven. So people focus on lack, and they're like, oh, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. Well, what you're saying to the universe is, well, you are not going to ever have enough money. And so it keeps on giving you that. And then the more you think about it, the more it gives you. And then you're like, oh, if you think I'm wealthy, I'm attractive, I have a healthy body. That's why I had to tell myself, my body was designed to heal me, so I will trust it to heal me. And I had to just not focus on the lack of I wasn't there yet, just know it was going to happen. And this is why these people have these focuses, and they live these lives that are fairly average or mediocre, and then they go down like a hill. And if you look at a cycle goes downhill first, then climbs up, and then cycles back. And the reason why you go on the downside is because you're building momentum to raise up, and you have to reach the bottom to have your value system set up so that when you get to the top, you can appreciate, be grateful and thankful you have it when you do. Otherwise, you'll lose it. This is why there's people who can get fame and fortune with a matter of years, sometimes for some people it's months, and they totally get wiped out. Because when they were on the downside, they didn't get their value system set up. So when it's on the upside and they're getting everything they wanted, that balance is shifted to the other direction. If they're not able to hold the value of what that balance was that they're trying to achieve, then they can't connect with it and it just disappears out of their hands. Interesting, isn't it?
It is. And I'd also like to recommend our listeners check out your website, getontoit.com. That's geton, number 2, it, red.com, the Human Instruction Manual. Get both parts. I've got the first part, the 5 laws that we've been discussing here. And has anybody ever told you, let me ask you this real quick. Have you seen the original Tron film?
Yes, it's been a while.
Okay.
Let's have the conversation. This is interesting. I know it's going to be.
Well, do you remember the red spaceship things, or not spaceships, but the red attack vessels that would go after these when they were inside of the actual VR system, when they were in the computer? This thing would, and you could play the video games too there. These things would kind of move around, and it looks just like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Explain the shape. I think I know.
Okay, well, look at your logo, and then take the 2 red pieces and connect them together, and then flip it vertically, right? So flip it up, and then that's pretty much what that thing looks like. And then and then if you take that away from it, and I look at just the circle with the slit in it, it looks like a reptilian shapeshifter eyeball, man. That's that's pretty cool. I like that.
Oh. I layered so many things in there. I got to tell you this cool story because I know you'll appreciate this. I know your audience will. Go back to the superhero thing. I consider myself the ambiguous hero, and one of the reasons why I was able to overcome a lot of things I did also when I broke my neck is the older brother was raising me to be the super athlete. I was 10 years old. I was playing football with his friends who were like 7 years older because he was 7 years older than me. And I loved, like I said, comic book heroes and things like this. And there was an ambiguous comic book hero that many people from the 80s may recall. And if you've never seen the show, it's quite comical, but it kind of gives that sense of that you can be your own hero thing. And it was the TV show The Greatest American Hero. And when I was trying to figure out how I should orient the book and sort of give it a title, I was talking to my friend in Hawaii, and he's somebody that I'd worked with for a while, and I've helped him move out to Hawaii, and he's doing really well with his business he's put out there. And I said to him, I said, I'm thinking I'm going to call this the Human Instruction Manual. And he's like, yeah, okay. And where I was living at the time, they actually were having these Comic-Con things, and I'd never been to one. I always liked stuff. I just, for a reason, never ended up going to one. And this particular one, they had a number of the various people from like Star Trek and so forth and so on. And the guy who played the Greatest American Hero, now his name eludes me at the moment. He also played in the movie House in the original Carrie movie. He was there. And there's his pictures, of the Greatest American Hero thing, and that logo is something similar to mine, not exactly. But I asked him, could he sign it for me? And he signs it for me, and then we go through a little picture thing, talk to him a little bit, shake the hand. And then I read it. And here's what he said. If people don't recall, in the show, in the first episode or something, he runs in this alien craft, and it gives him a box, and the box is the suit that he wears, kind of like a Superman powers and stuff. It's really kind of a different type of a superhero type show. And he's a teacher, and he's like a do-gooder, always wanting to do the best for things, and I get this suit, and he doesn't understand the powers, and there's an instruction manual that comes with the suit, and he loses the instruction manual. And on this picture, when he wrote it, he says, "When you find the Human Instruction Manual, contact me." when you find the instruction manual, contact me. I was like, that's it. That solidified it. That had to be the Human Instruction Manual, because it was just so timely. That was within a couple of days of having that conversation with my friend. Then I went to this thing, and that popped up, and that's kind of how it all kind of went together too with that logo.
It's a cool logo, and I certainly think of the Flash. It looks like the Flash. He's got that on the circle thing, I think, kind of on one of the older ones, doesn't he? The original Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I like it. Now, you must have studied sizzles.
Not directly. I'm not even really familiar with that, actually.
Oh, you did it naturally then. A sizzle is when you create basically a logo or a specific symbol based upon other symbols that represent certain things, and subconsciously it has certain reactions, not only on the person that made it, but on others as well. So that's really cool.
Well, there's also another thing in there, and it says it in the book, and we didn't cover it, but the logo has the acronym HIM in it for Human Instruction Manual. And I thought that was kind of cool, too. I was like, how can I put a lot of meaning behind it so that when those who start to pick it up, they can see through the choices they make, the perceptions they have, the awareness they have, that they can start to see all these greater things that exist within this little emblem type thing. And they can identify that's the superhero within them.
That's total Sidzle, man. 100%. That's pretty cool. I like how you put that together. And, so do you have part 2 out yet? Or you said that it hasn't been released yet. You've written it, but.
Yeah, I've written it. I've only had the part 1 out for maybe a month or so now.
Okay.
I'm in the process of just getting it out there. Most people, it's like, here's an example that your audience, you don't know what you don't know. I was never an author before. I never wrote a book. And there's a huge learning curve. One, people think because you produce a book, all of a sudden you're like a millionaire or something. Well, you have to sell books. Unless you have
you mean you didn't buy a mega yacht yet?
Yeah, and then the other part is that you think because a book goes for like $25 or something that they're making $25. You got to pay everybody off in the distribution who prints it. So if something costs $15, you go 5 to the distributor, 5 to the printer. Okay, you get $5. So you're getting a fraction of it. And if you're independent, getting that out there, it takes a lot of energy because you have to get out to the sources that you think would appreciate it. Then they have to actually read it like yourself, and then they have to be able to connect with other people. And that's a process. So writing a book is great, but it's going to take me a certain amount of time before there's a crescendo of enough people reading it and talking about it before it goes somewhere. And then maybe one of the standard publishers will pick it up, and then they can market it more and all of that stuff. And most people don't recognize all that stuff. It's just like, and I understood there was something I wasn't quite prepared for when I went down this path. But as I started doing it, I started recognizing it's like, here, I'm living what I'm telling other people. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know I was going to need to do this or do that, or I had to learn this, or there's this, and if you don't do this at this time, all of this stuff. So yeah, it was a big learning curve. It's kind of funny because when I was growing up, one of the reasons I went to math and science was primarily because I did not like writing. And it's the things that we dislike the most, which we need to spend the most time on, because that's the thing that we're going to be able to learn the most from. So I learned a heck of a lot about writing a book and the creation of a book, too. And the second part of the book will be available once I get enough of an attention on the first one. Because and with all honesty, until people can absorb what we've talked about, digest it, read through it, and start to use it in their life, to take it to that next level. I mean, for me, I've been doing this ever since I was 10, and largely I didn't recognize what I was doing. I was kind of natural at it because I adjusted to making that process. It'd be very difficult for some people to bring within their reality if I put both books together and if I had both books available, because some people who understand the first book because of their own experiences, and they're prepared for the second one. If they read it and they start talking about it, and they get other people to read it without reading the first one, you're gonna have a schism between the first guy and the second guy, because they're not going to be able to relate to the back experience. So like watching Back to the Future 2 before you saw Back to the Future 1. It's like you kind of figure it out, but it just isn't as good.
Right. Well, I got to say, man, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on with us, Donald, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you again soon. Now, I would like to let our audience know once again, check out Donald's website at getontoit.com. That's geton2it.com. And I'd also like to recommend, if you enjoy these shows and you want to continue to listen to them first before most people have access to them, if you subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/Clandestine Time Lord, you'll have access to the latest podcasts first and free. And also our website, leakproject.com, is actually getting a brand new remodel. And when it's done, folks, I'm telling you, the gentleman that's putting this together for us is just amazing. So it's going to be fantastic. It's not going to be one of those websites that you go to and you say, wow, you did a good job putting that together. It's kind of like your site. I got to tell you, you've got a very nice website, and whoever put it together for you did a very good job. I mean, it's just so the icons are so well presented, and the background's nice, the colors are good. And this is cool. And so another thing that I'd also like to bring up about your book is the way that you put it together. I mean, you wrote it very well, and it's got big pages. And then one thing that's cool about your book that we haven't had a chance to really talk about, because you need visuals for this kind of stuff, and you'll need to get the book for this, folks, is there's almost 30 pages of these different graphs and charts that talk about the different light spectrums, human energy fields, etc. And it brings things together a lot better as well. So it's definitely worth spending the $25 or so picking up this book. I mean, that's a bargain. It's really a good price point, and you can put this away in your library when you're done reading it. Read it multiple times, and like it is, man, it's the Human Instruction Manual. So thank you so much for joining us, Donald. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you so very much. And I appreciate you pointing that out because for me to say it loses a little bit of the texture because, people, there's a concept that I think your audience will appreciate this. Did you ever watch, or are you familiar with that Ender's Game, that movie or the book series?
Absolutely. The books were, I heard, much better than the movie, but I did enjoy the book as well. The movie, yeah.
So there's something that is really cool about the second book and the second book's title. It's called Speaker for the Dead. And you are Speaker for the Dead. And here's why. Your platform and what you do gives a voice to people that would otherwise be dead to other individuals. You speak for them and bring them alive. And I don't know if you recognize that power and influence that you're doing so with such energy and desire, wanting to seek out and help others and learn yourself. The way you do Leak Project, and that's one of the reasons why I sent you a book and connected with you. And I actually went to take a look at the website and recognized there was something that was going on with it because last time I looked at it was, it was what it was before. I knew that you, one, would be someone who would value what this stood for, and two, that we would be connecting with your audience, which I look forward for them connecting with me, to be able to start this renaissance in human understanding that's always been available to us, but up until this point, for whatever reason, just hasn't happened. And I look forward to joining you and everyone else to, make this happen. Because this isn't about me. This isn't about ego. I'm not doing this for fortune or fame. I'm willing to be the voice of what this could be and to help direct other people. But I want to change the direction in which we as human race can go. And everyone who buys the book and just does their part to interact and to spread the word can be part of a force greater than anything they know if they just start to invest in that time themselves to do that. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure our listeners really are going to enjoy this. So thank you, folks, and make sure to be the change you want to see. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Donald Allen Williams. GetOnToIt.com. Get on, number 2, it.com. Now let me tell you a little bit about Donald and his testimony before we get started. At the age of 10, when he was playing tag in the house with his younger brother, he broke his C1 vertebrae in his neck, which is commonly fatal. He was instantly paralyzed from the neck down. With his parents out of town that week in December, his older brother called 911 and got him to the hospital where the doctors did not take x-rays because they assumed he was faking injury. They even encouraged his dad to check him out of the hospital to see if he'd stop faking it by telling his father that Don was stunned while playing and was in good enough condition to go play in the snow. His father had to carry Don to the car and to a bed. A day later, x-rays were taken, but doctors could not find evidence of damage. When it became evident that something really was wrong, a specialist finally made the correct diagnosis. Now, throughout the injury, the diagnosis, the terrible surgery, and the recovery process, no one even bothered listening or asking Don what he was feeling or bothered to explain anything of what was happening. The neglect fueled a powerful anger and determination in him to recover. It forced him to grow up a lot sooner than his siblings or friends. It also had him curious as to what makes people think and act as they do, and to wonder why no one bothered to communicate with him since. He was the one with that experience. Now, he put together a really good book. It's called Human Instruction Manual. You can pick it up on his website direct from GetOnToIt.com, or you can pick it up from Amazon. And we're going to get his testimony today, and we're also going to get the keys to unlocking the Matrix, the Human Instruction Manual.
Back together any better than anyone else. And at the age of 10, I was like, oh, this is what's really going on versus what we're told. So that's kind of where the great eye-opener took place. I grew up much like anyone else. Went through college, got a degree in mechanical engineering, was last in, first out, cycled through, making a million, saving millions, although they didn't want to pay me millions. And that was largely because I intimidated the hell out of my bosses. I didn't need to be in the industry for years to figure out what would make it effective to what my job was, to what the customers needed, to making things effective within the company. And I quickly would pick that up within the first 3 to 6 months. And basically, corporate America as is doesn't like to promote anybody anymore. You think someone who is in charge wants to promote people up so that they can be uplifted, but now it's just holding on to your own job and stifling everybody else. And after I saw that a number of times, I said, I think I'm going to reach out and use this information I've been using, these experiences and all this stuff that I've gathered throughout my life, and actually write something down, make a website, make some other courses for those who really want to invest in themselves, and open up an opportunity for something different. There's a lot of people who do it's like self-development, self-help type stuff, and there's a lot of people who don't really get a lot out of it. They can read it, sounds good, it feels good, but they can't really identify with it. Then the other thing is there's a lot of motivator and inspirational people out there. Yeah, I could go through my story, and we can relate that, and to some people it might be seen as motivational, to others maybe not. But at the end of the day, it's what I learned through my experience and how I could translate these small but significant finite realities that we live in that we kind of push to the side because we're trained to look at other things. And we're always looking at the shadow instead of looking at the actual picture. So we don't recognize we're in a great illusion that we're allowing and willing to allow to continue. That kind of make sense?
Sure. And I don't know if I heard you properly, but at the very beginning you said you broke your neck and nobody believed you for the first 2 days? Yes,
I was fully paralyzed. And, if you go to the website, get onto it, and you look under my name, and there's like a little video there. It goes on for about 40 minutes or so, giving the basic story. And, they thought I was making it up because they didn't take any x-rays. Given the circumstances, they thought I was doing it for attention. They were putting all their ideas into it instead of looking at the facts. And once they finally figured it out, they were like, oh my, we've been carrying you around like a rag doll, and if we would have done the wrong thing, you would have been dead like instantaneously. It's a miracle that I'm alive, and that's how the doctors look at it. So it's just kind of one of those things. To me, it's my existence. But to other people, they go, oh man, how you, and people ask questions like, how does that feel? Well, when you can't move, you can't feel anything. But one of the unique things about that is when you can't feel anything, you actually recognize what your feelings are and how your feelings connect with things. This is like the internal feelings, the emotional feelings, not the tactile feelings. There's a big difference between that.
Did you experience an out-of-body type phenomenon or have a near-death experience as well when you broke your neck?
No near-death. Out-of-body, there was a period when I would say, in flux, where when I couldn't move to when some things had happened where I was able to move a little bit before surgery and all that. And that experience was something like out of Star Trek. I felt like I was phasing through the table or the bed or whatever I was in. I couldn't have like a feeling like I would think of it or you would think of it. I just felt like for whatever reason that I was able to touch the floor. And it's hard to put that into context that makes sense because even to this day I don't really know what that was. So I'm thinking maybe that was like my energetic body going through the whatever it was and touching the ground, and I don't know. But it was a weird sensation to be true though.
So what did you do to break your neck?
I actually did a running somersault onto a couch. So you use the couch arm and you just, I was playing tag in the house and ran towards it. And I had done this before. And as I do a big tuck and roll, normally it's like a tuck roll bounce, and you're 4 or 5 feet in front of the person that you're playing tag in the house with, and no big deal. But this time I did it. I landed with the pillow square behind my neck there, and I was in a state of being stunned because I couldn't quite figure out what was happening. I could see my body, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't move it. And I was wondering if I was dead. It was very surreal. And then within seconds, because of the ferocity in which I played with my younger brother, any game that we played, within seconds he's beat me over the head with a pillow. And I can't really do anything. So it's quite the series of shocking moments, one after the other.
Oh, geez, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So are you walking now?
Yeah. If you meet me, you would never know that it happened. I was fully recovered in less than 6 months.
What did the doctors say when they finally realized you broke your neck?
Well, I broke the C1, which is right next to the brain stem, kind of like a hairline fracture. And the reason why they couldn't find anything when they finally did do scans is because normally when that happens, people die. Your involuntary organs stop. So, I've heard a lot of things when I was younger. You're here for a reason. You're going. There must be some reason you're around, that type of thing. And I was always kind of like, well, I'm telling you things that I'm experiencing, and nobody's listening. So will that happen the rest of my life? I don't know. That type of thing. It was more like the discord, because the experiences that I would experience in the hospital, even after they discovered what it was, and when I communicated what my issue was, they still had a hard time following through and listening to what I was saying. They always had their own agenda, and I always just had to kind of like step back and kind of like watch and do my best to do what I had to do. And people don't recognize that self-responsibility isn't this weighty thing with bills. It's an internal deal, and it's based off of your decisions to want to be in a certain space within the place that you exist. And one of the things that's highly important, that's covered in the book, and it's what I call the shift from outside in to inside out. The way society teaches us things. It's functional, it works. But both sides of the equation need to be there. There's a balance. And we need the outside world to survive, to live, sustenance, and to take care of, shelter and things like this. But we have been brought up defining ourselves based off of the outside experience inward, so that we don't have a good context of who we are. And we relate to all of our needs and wants based off of outside stimuli and things like this. Whereas when I broke my neck, all that disappeared. All I had was my senses, but I couldn't rely on that outside world. I had to move inward. And when I did that, I recognized this inside-out perspective is really where the control takes place. That, yes, you may feel certain experiences emotionally, or you may think certain things, but that's all an inside job. No one can force you to be that way. And people, there's an analogy that I use, if you go to space or you're on the moon, you have to wear an astronaut suit, right? If you go to the bottom of the ocean or something, you wear a diver's suit. You go into a hostile environment like where there's fires and stuff, you have to put on some protective gear. Well, whatever we are, we're basically drivers to a genetic spacesuit. And feelings are the equivalent of all the little neat gizmos and knobs and gears, like when you're in a car, that have lights that blink on and off, telling you different things. And the emotions are there to tell you, this is what's going on. And you're supposed to understand that that's information to make a decision. You're not supposed to jump and react to things. That make sense?
Sure, absolutely it does. And I'm guessing that when you had that experience so many years ago and you're going through this process, what was it like for you a month into it?
Well, the biggest challenge for me was I going to be able to fully be what I was? Because the largest mental hurdle, and most people, what we could call mental strength and emotional strength, there's no way to really quantify it. But the big challenge there is being able to recognize that you're in a state of progression, that you are wanting to seek, feeling a sense of well-being that's better than where you are now. And as long as that's happening, that's good. But when you're comparing it to where you once were, given where you are, that creates a unique feeling that I call constructive discontent, meaning that you recognize that there's something off, and you're unsettled with it, that unsettledness makes you want to resolve the issue. And that's kind of where I was. Prior to this, like a lot of kids, I would imagine, part of the reasons I use the superhero things, I like comic books and I draw, and I couldn't, even hold anything in my hand to draw or anything, or paint anything, or anything like that. And there were these kids in the hospital that would draw pictures with paints and stuff on the windows. And when I tried to do what I, imagined in my head like I used to, it was spooky because it's like, I can't do this quite yet. But notice how I said that, not yet. I saw the limit, but I didn't see that limit was going to be there forever. And one of the things that I also use as an analogy to help people understand some of how this works is in an engineering world, with my background with engineering, it doesn't matter what you're making, called a car, a building, a box of some sort, a can. When the actual item is drawn up, that's a concept. But then when it's created in the world, whether it's manufacturing or building, you're catching up to the creation, right? So when I was going through my healing process, I was healing myself knowing that I was catching up to my future that I was creating for myself.
Is that what you think was the key? I mean, just realizing that you're not everything at this current time. I mean, you're looking at every aspect.
Right. You're becoming and always becoming more. And change is inevitable. You cannot fight it. You could try, but it'll smack you on the rear. And the change I was going through was actually something that I'd gone through before. But when you're a baby, you're not cognitively aware of some of these things. So there's like a disconnect, a disassociation, because your body was trained over a period of time to be a certain way. Well, when you break your neck and you have the disconnect, all of a sudden it's like the program memory wipe. This is the mind, even though it once did it, it's like all that memory got wiped out. It's sort of like taking a computer and had a memory wipe on it. And it's sort of like weird because it's like I did this before. Why does this feel like so different? What was once second nature? And this is one of the things I also get into in the book, that our society focuses in all too much on hows. And this is one of the reasons why people don't feel successful in life. They measure their success and what they do based off of being stifled by hows, when in fact how is a process. I had no idea how I was going to fully recover from breaking my neck. I just knew that I was going to. And once I did, then I could tell how. So like if someone loses weight, they did it a certain way. And they can tell somebody, do this, and you should be able to lose the weight that I did. But there's no guarantee, because different people, different chemistries, different body makes, and all these different things. So this is a process that worked for me. You might want to try it. And that person tries that. They kind of try a little bit of something else for somebody, and they create their own mix, and they discover their own how. So how is an after effect. And the big focus needs to be the why. What's the motivation? What is the intention? What's your drive? And that's where, at 10 years old, I was like, it's only me. Even though I have these adults that are supposed to be helping me, they're failing me, they're not listening. I'm going to have to pass time in this adult world, but literally this is all an inside job.
And I also noticed as well that you kind of talk about history being rewritten by the victors. Whoever wins the game writes the history. So, and you talk about that a little bit more and connect it with DNA and stuff, and I was wondering if you could discuss that with our listeners.
Well, this is one of the things I recognized early on, is that most of what you hear, or most of what you're taught, is opinion and theory. And it's not as much really the facts, right? Even, the fact we're speaking the English language and we're having conversation, that was an opinion. A couple grunts, a couple sounds, and, a handful of humans said, okay, this is what this means. And it only applies to those who agree to that language, right? And then if you don't agree to it and speak a different language, you don't understand it all. But the fact is, once everyone agrees upon it and they start doing it, then they define something and they have an agreement upon it, then it creates sort of like a pseudo-fact. But, the communication is what you get out of it, because, two people can have the same conversation and have a totally different meaning of what they get out of it because of how they define words. So what I was noticing earlier on is history represents his story. Meaning the person who wins, the person who is the person in charge or defeats whatever, the person with the title tells their version of the story, and that's the one that's sold. And I noticed this typically, I think it was about this, within 12 hours or so of when I broke my neck. Because when I first broke my neck, they finally figured out that something was goofy. They sent me to the hospital. They didn't do anything at the hospital. They sent me on a flat stretcher, and the next morning I wake up, and, I can't even control peeing in the bed or whatever. And I hear the doctor saying, your son's fine. He can go sled riding, because it just started snowing that day or the day before. And he just stunned himself and he was playing. And I said, oh, so he's telling his story, and he's the guy who is in charge, so people are going to believe him. So people start to go over and over again with that. And then when I was, going through the usual history and classes and stuff in school, I noticed, there's always these blue bloods, these people who believe themselves to be bigger and better than everyone else. and they call themselves